This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China releases a white paper elaborating its mission in UN peacekeeping operations. WHO warns against easing restrictions as Europe records an alarming surge in new infections. And South Sudan's rival parties inch closer to a deal on the formation of a unity government. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Let's take a look at more stories making headlines this hour. And in your business news, South Africa Reserve Bank pauses rate-cutting cycle as economy reopens after COVID-19 restrictions. In your sport this hour, Nigerians' Tokyo 2020 Paralympics medal hopefuls run into new hurdles. Let's begin in China, and the country has released a white paper on the participation of its armed forces in the UN peacekeeping operations. The white paper detailed China's role in UN peacekeeping missions over the past 30 years. Zhang Dan has more.
这是中国政府发表的首部以中国军队参加联合国维和行动为主题的专题性白皮书。
This first-time white paper has a lot of ground to cover. In the past 30 years, over 40,000 Chinese peacekeepers have been sent to 25 UN missions in more than 20 countries and regions. And now, the white paper elaborates on what China's mission is.
首次明确提出
For the first time, it puts forward a concept of our missions in UN peacekeeping operations, that is, to shoulder our responsibility as a major country, uphold world peace, and contribute to building a community with a shared future for mankind.
The past 3 decades have seen China's armed forces become a key force in UN peacekeeping operations. An official from China's defense ministry says the white paper tells the world the stance of the Chinese military.
The underlying message of the release, I think, is to give the world a clear message that China supports the authority and the role of the UN in maintaining international peace and security.
Figures cited show that China has provided 20 training programs to over 1,500 peacekeepers from more than 60 countries. And since 2015, China has sent 25 rotations of engineer and medical units, totaling over 7,000 personnel to missions in 5 countries. Experts say China's growing role in UN peacekeeping operations is a major sign of the country's willingness to contribute to sustaining world order. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
Well, let's just get more on China's contribution to peacekeeping missions in Africa. I'm now joined by Matthias Mundi, who is an independent risk analyst. Thank you so much for joining us, Matthias. China is a leading contributor of peacekeeping missions. How crucial is this, given that the UN faces challenges in getting enough peacekeepers?
It is a very important contribution by China to the UN peacekeeping process in the world. When you look at that, there are very big challenges in terms of getting personnel and even financial resources to fund those operations. But China so far is the second largest contributor in terms of finances, and it's also a top contributor of troops. So this is a very important element for China to take this initiative. And it's also important to consider that most of the UN operations in Africa, in the world, almost 50% of them are in Africa, where China is a big player. So for China to continue taking this leading role, it means that China is going to support the international system, especially in countries in Africa, some of them which might be struggling with stability issues.
Matthew, so from what we know, many of the areas that need peacekeepers are poorly developed. What has been the impact of China's intervention in improving livelihoods in those countries?
One of the key elements of Chinese peacekeeping intervention in some of these countries is not just coming to stabilize, to enforce ceasefires or maybe stabilize political and security situations. they are also coming with enforcement mechanisms whereby they are supporting the rehabilitation and infrastructure, reconstructing infrastructure which has been destroyed by conflict. They are also supporting the reconstruction of social services in some of these countries, rebuilding schools, rebuilding hospitals, and also trying to, to foster better community engagement. So China's engagement in Africa goes beyond the element of just providing boots on the ground. It's supporting socio-economic and economic reconstruction on some of these countries, which might be struggling in terms of resources to rebuild after maybe years of conflict.
Thank you so much for that, Matthias Moendi. He is an independent risk analyst. Let's now head over to Senegal, where locally based Chinese companies have donated funds for families affected by floods. Ongoing heavy rains in West Africa have affected Senegal and neighboring nations, with homes and livelihoods being destroyed by the raging waters. Dakar is one of the cities in Senegal that has seen a huge number of people displaced. The Chinese companies donated over $18,000 that will go into buying food and non-food items for the affected families. The mayor of Dakar, Madame Sosham Wardini, thanked the Chinese firms and praised the cordial ties between China and Senegal. Well, Japan says it will send a team of 5 experts to Mauritius to investigate the grounding of a Japanese-owned ship off the country's coast, which led to an environmental crisis. The bulk carrier, owned by Japan's Nagashiki Shipping and chartered by Mitsui OSK, ran aground after hitting a reef in the Mauritian waters on July the 25th. Days later, it began spilling oil into the pristine waters around the Indian Ocean island. The full impact of the oil spill is still unfolding. The Japanese team will be dispatched on the 20th of September. Japan previously had told Mauritius that it would offer support on an unprecedented scale. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed life for children around the world. Those living in poverty have been hit even harder. A joint report by UNICEF and Save the Children is shedding light on the issue. Asatal has the details.
From distance learning to wearing masks, children have had to make incredible adjustments during the COVID-19 pandemic. Those living in poverty or low-income households have been hit even harder. A joint report by UNICEF and Save the Children is highlighting the dire situation. According to the report, there has been a 15% increase in children living in deprivation. This means an additional 150 million children have been pushed into poverty. This brings a total to 1.2 billion children living in deprivation globally. The report puts forth suggestions which look beyond just fiscal remedies. This includes providing children with the necessary tools to take part in distance learning. The CEO of Save the Children, Inger Ashing, noted that the pandemic has caused the biggest global education emergency in history, adding that it would be hard for vulnerable children and their families to make up the loss. The report also suggests increasing access to quality health care as well as family-friendly policies like paid leave. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, South Africa has one of the biggest social grant programs in the world. It allocates around $16 billion to support the vulnerable and the elderly. But when the coronavirus pandemic hit, the government was forced to widen its social safety net through increased cash transfers and an extensive food program. CGTN's Julie Shaya sat down with one of the organizations identified to assist in food distribution.
South Africa boosted social grants by $3 billion as part of a $26 billion COVID-19 emergency relief package. But it simply wasn't enough, with millions at risk of starving. It added a food program enlisting the help of NGOs like Islamic Relief South Africa.
Many people have been living, even before lockdown, from hand to mouth. People have lost their jobs, businesses have closed down. And the impact of this, or the economic impact, has been far-reaching. Food security has become a serious issue, not only for the most marginalized, but even for middle-class families.
The aid organization has delivered over 100,000 food packs and hot meals in the Western Cape over the last 6 months.
60% of the funding for our food pack distribution or food aid program was by government, and that's provincial as well as national government. So they send us the beneficiary list, and we would do the distribution to those particular individuals, working very closely with the representative of the social development department in that particular area.
Reports of corruption and mismanagement tainted the country's aid efforts, but Islamic Relief says it's followed strict protocols.
There was the process that government went through to identify service providers from the NGO sector that had the capacity and the experience in order to deliver aid. Governance is something that government looks at. Do you have the necessary government, your governance policies and processes in place, your transparency, accountability framework, and Islamic Relief is one of 10 NGOs in the world that has achieved the core humanitarian standard for humanitarian interventions.
Extended grant payments come to an end in October. Charities Aid Foundation Southern Africa worked with hundreds of private NGOs through the lockdown. It says the current system is not sustainable.
We are mindful that this emergency aid must continue, but we are also looking at a post-COVID world. And so, we are guiding our philanthropists, our donors with evidence-based research to understand where they should be placing their philanthropic donations, their CSI spend, etc.
Millions of South Africans will return to work as the country moves to level 1, but with unemployment expected to climb to 35%, it will place a further burden on the state to increase the social safety net. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, a group of international scholars are warning that COVID-19 is bringing about new challenges in the global fight against terrorism. Experts from both China and Cameroon made the comments in an online seminar to discuss anti-terrorism, radicalization, and human rights. Both sides shared research on extremist groups and underlined the importance of multilateralism and international cooperation in tackling new and evolving challenges.
The international community should provide technical assistance and capacity building to member states, especially developing countries, taking the different national conditions, cultural history into consideration. There is no such a difference between so-called good and bad terrorism. Terrorism and extremism should not be linked with any particular country, ethnicity, or religion, and there should not be any politicization and double standards.
According to some of the research, in recent years, more than 1,000 terrorists from Xinjiang are belonging into this category. Both of the East Turkestan Force and the violent terrorism who participate in the global jihad have granted become part of the international terrorism network, posing a continuous threat to the international community. Therefore, the counterterrorism and the radicalization measures implement not only the safeguard to the national security, social order, and human rights, but also an important part of region and global counterterrorism efforts.
Global coronavirus cases have surpassed 30 million. The World Health Organization is warning Europe of an alarming surge on the continent. A record 54,000 new infections were reported in a 24-hour period last week. WHO's regional director says the jump should serve as a wake-up call. He also cautioned against European economies easing restrictions. Governments such as France and Spain have been introducing local restrictions instead of nationwide measures to limit the economic fallout. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break, but more news coming when we return, including South Sudan's rival parties inch closer to a deal on the formation of a unity government. And in our Jumbo Studio series, we look at how communities in northern Kenya are protecting elephants from poachers.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shishi, Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, parties to South Sudan's peace deal say they have agreed on most of the issues delaying the formation of a unity government. They're now urging the international community to support the implementation of the agreement. This follows a briefing to the UN Security Council by the head of the UN mission in South Sudan. CGTN's Patrick Oyet tells us more.
The formation of South Sudan's unity government began in February with the appointment of ministers, but disagreement over power sharing in individual states is delaying progress. State governors were only appointed in June, and the parliament hasn't been reformed yet. There are also still no local government officials, and the various armed groups that were fighting each other have now been unified and retrained, but they haven't been redeployed. The United Nations says it is concerned about that lack of progress, but South Sudan's government insists that the peace process is still moving forward.
All the remaining areas which need to be agreed on, the discussion going on, we are very hopeful that all those issues will be resolved in the coming days. We ask United Nations Security Council to support the implementation of peace agreement and to rally behind the transitional government of national unity to implement the peace agreement, because at this stage we need support of everybody.
Elections are scheduled for 2023 towards the end of the new government's mandate, but the UN says the elections are likely to be delayed, which could then lead to more armed conflicts in the country. Meanwhile, there are still armed groups opposed to the current peace deal. South Sudan's government is negotiating with them, but a final binding agreement can only be reached once there is a fully functional administration in the country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Let's head over to the U.S. now, where U.S. President Donald Trump says he's spoken to American companies over a deal to partner with Chinese-owned video-sharing platform TikTok.
Well, we're making a decision. We spoke today to Walmart, Oracle. I guess Microsoft is still involved. We'll make a decision, but nothing much has changed. We'll make a decision soon.
The U.S. president made the comments on Thursday upon reviewing the company's proposals. Last month, he'd given TikTok 45 days to sell its U.S. operations or face a ban, which President Trump says could happen as early as next week. But a deal could prevent the ban. The app's parent company, ByteDance, aims to keep a majority stake in TikTok and ownership of the app's algorithms. It says Beijing would still need to approve a deal due to a law on exporting technology. Chinese officials say the company should not be coerced by the U.S.
Over the past few days, my colleagues and I have repeatedly made clear our position on this issue. We urge the U.S. side to respect the principles of the market economy and fair competition, abide by international economic and trade rules, stop politicizing normal economic and trade cooperation, and provide a fair, just, and non-discriminatory business environment for foreign companies to invest and operate in the United States.
Let's bring our attention back here to the continent, where Kenya's elephant numbers are growing despite a recent World Wildlife Fund report that indicates a nearly 70% drop in global wildlife populations. As part of our series Jumbo Studio, CGTN's Enoch Sikolia looks at how local communities are forging a sustainable relationship with the wild.
Samburu National Reserve lies in the northern part of Kenya. At this time of the year, there is little rainfall, but wildlife is in abundance. The National Reserve is home to species native to the north. Including the rare gravy zebra, the Somali ostrich, and the reticulated giraffe. When you drive through the Samburu National Reserve, you will be able to see quite a number of animals: lions, leopards, giraffes, zebras, name them. But this jurisdiction is home to the world's largest animal, the elephant. The reserve's marshland stretches to the horizon, an ideal environment for over 100 elephants. It's the cooler evening hours, and this herd has come by the banks of Ewasongiro River. The river is crucial to the survival of the animals in the area. These elephants live in small family groups. The head of this family is the alpha female, the matriarch, the oldest member of the family. She has the experience to survive in this extreme environment. She knows when it's safe to have a drink. With her foot, she signals other members of the family to approach the river. Calves circle their mothers for the much-needed nutrition. The matriarch and her sister circle around baby elephants for protection. When the drinking spree is complete, the matriarch leads the way from the water point. Since childhood, she has mastered the routes to water points and food sources. A herd of elephants rarely travels too far from a source of water. Ideally, they need to drink every day. But they have been known for going without water while traveling for long distances between feeding grounds. These journeys can be dangerous and deadly for the elephants. Even in this apparent paradise, there are dangers afoot. They move as a unit, forming a protective ring around calves against predators. But in this vastness, there is another enemy as deadly as a lion: poachers. They kill elephants for their valuable ivory tusks.
If someone tries dirty games with the elephants, that person is my enemy. It's either he kills me or I kill him. So I find anyone trying to kill an elephant, I will finish him before he does.
It's been a grueling 4 hours for these rangers, chasing leads on illegal activity within the reserve area. Intelligence had pointed to a likely presence of poachers in an area favored by elephants. And the chase is on. The possible poachers could be armed, and so the rangers are trading with caution. For these protectors of wildlife, Disappointment often follows a hunt. The signs are there, but whoever was here had already left. A sharp, double-edged knife was recovered. Rangers suspected it was left behind by a potential poacher who had just fled. For the team, it was a success, having just thwarted what could have been an elephant death.
For a dead one, it's no more useful to us. You know what we normally do? We only take the tusk and return them to the armory. Nothing else. But when it's alive, it makes good money because every visitor come today, tomorrow even some years, meet the same elephant, take the picture and pay.
The management of the Samburu National Reserve, in collaboration with many other key stakeholders, have put in place measures that ensures poachers are kept at bay. Bernard Nyaruk was recruited as a ranger from the Samburu community that lives around the National Reserve. It's part of the strategy of ensuring the local community is encouraged to be part of conservation efforts. Some of the rangers employed here are former poachers, men who have now denounced the illegal trade.
We have the supplier and we have the buyer. And somebody cannot come all the way from Nairobi or from Mombasa or from any part of the country to come and kill an elephant. They must use the locals who are within the area.
We encourage them to continue protecting wildlife, and they go to their areas, and that's why they have known the importance, and they have already started to establish conservancy.
This large group is evidence of the reserve's conservation efforts. Several elephant herds have congregated here. For the young ones, it's a time to socialize and learn from their elders. For the older ones, it's time to renew their acquaintances. The latest Living Planet report by the World Wildlife Fund shows that elephant populations globally have significantly increased. The report attributes this to increased conservation efforts, focusing on the involvement of communities living around parks and conservation areas.
Modeling from science that is featured in this report shows that we still have a small opportunity to reverse the loss of nature if we take urgent and unprecedented action today.
The Samburu community started an elephant sanctuary 4 years ago. The rescue center is for orphaned elephants left behind following the death of their mothers at the sanctuary. They are cared for until they are old enough to defend themselves. Then they are released back to the wild to find a family.
They really need love and passion, and whenever you give them love, they really give love back. So sometimes even they rumble, like when they see their mothers or when they see the bottle, they just rumble.
Since 2016, over 30 orphaned elephants have been rescued, with 10 of them already reintegrated back into the wild.
Well, let's now recap on news making headlines this hour. China has released a white paper on the participation of its armed forces in the UN peacekeeping operations. The white paper details China's role in UN peacekeeping missions over the past 30 years. It also elaborates on China's mission in the peacekeeping efforts. In the past 30 years, over 40,000 Chinese peacekeepers have been sent to 25 UN missions in more than 20 countries and regions. Global coronavirus cases have surpassed 30 million. The World Health Organization is warning Europe of an alarming surge on the continent. A record 54,000 new infections were reported in a 24-hour period last week. The WHO's regional director says the jump should serve as a wake-up call. He also cautioned against European economies easing restrictions. Well, parties to South Sudan's peace deal say they have agreed on most of the issues that have been delaying the formation of a unity government. They're now urging the international community to support the implementation of the agreement. The formation of a unity government began in February with the appointment of ministers, but it's been delayed by disagreements over power sharing in individual states. The UN says it's concerned by the delays. That's a wrap of the top stories we've been following this hour. Let's take a look at what's coming up in business. South Africa's Reserve Bank pauses rate-cutting cycle as economy reopens after COVID-19 restrictions.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
It's time now for the business news. As most market commentators and economists had anticipated, the Monetary Policy Committee of the South African Reserve Bank has decided to keep the repo rate on hold at 3.5%. The decision announced by SARB Governor Lesesha Kanyako follows the bank's three-day MPC meeting in Pretoria. This means the prime commercial lending rate remains at a more than 40-year low of 7%. This is part of its response to the economic fallout from the pandemic. SARB has already slashed the rate at which it lends money to commercial banks by 300 basis points since the beginning of this year. The move to hold the repo rate this time around comes just a day after President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that South Africa would ease its COVID-19 restrictions to alert level 1 over the next month. Well, South Sudan's huge dependence on oil to fund government operations and provide foreign currency earnings is partly to blame for its current economic meltdown. Just last month, the central bank admitted that it had run out of foreign exchange reserves and it could no longer limit the depreciation of the South Sudanese pound. CGTN's Patrick Yet has the details of the unfolding crisis.
South Sudan is facing the worst economic crisis since independence. The local currency is depreciating daily against the dollar, and the Central Bank of South Sudan says its reserves are depleted due to years of civil war and the impact of the coronavirus. Many Juba residents say they are now unable to afford basic goods.
This economic crisis is increasing, and I believe that it is going to worsen the situations. I don't know what kind of this country is going to be in this coming days. So we as citizens, we are demanding the government to take measures in this time so that we control, we control the economy.
It's not easy these days. Everything has gone high. The rate of the dollar has increased, and affects also the school.
President Salva Kiir has set up a committee headed by one of the 5 vice presidents, James Wani-Iga, to come up with measures to arrest the deteriorating situation.
One of the recommendations from the committee is a total overhaul of some government's revenue-generating institutions, such as the National Revenue Authority and Customs.
President Kiir has now replaced the finance minister, the head of the country's revenue authority, and the head of the oil company, Nile Petroleum. South Sudan depends on oil money to fund 98% of its budget, but the pandemic has led to a fall in global oil prices. The government says it is now focusing on bringing in revenue from other sources like taxation.
We have found out that a lot of exemptions have been issued, and the money that we are losing in the process is more than what we collect. So we have today resolved that we are going to do thorough investigation and examination of the same.
The Central Bank of South Sudan says it is working on measures to try and address the issue of inflation. The bank is threatening to ban the use of dollars in the country, but that would be a huge challenge because many South Sudanese businesses import goods and require dollars to do so. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
In Uganda, bloggers are worried that they could soon be shut down with a new regulation that would require them to pay a fee to operate in the country. Beginning next month, bloggers will be required to pay about $30 per year. Campaigners say it's the latest blow in suppressing media freedom, but local authorities argue that the move is aimed at widening the country's tax base. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
You sent her a link?
Yes.
Rosebel Kagumire is a social media blogger. She uses her platform to defend women's rights. But Kagumire is concerned that the new regulation and the payment she would have to make could curtail her freedom of expression.
When someone attacks your very right to live a dignified life and earn a living and be able to wake up every morning and function, I think we cannot take these kind of moves, directives lightly.
But the Uganda Communications Commission, a government body with the mandate to regulate the media, says it wants to raise domestic revenue.
If somebody goes in the space of gathering information, this information could be paid for, it could be sponsored, it could be carrying advertising, it could be for subscription, and this information is for simultaneous reception by the public. Now you've entered into the business of broadcasting. You need to be known by the regulator. You need to know your obligations. You need to know the standards. You need to know the rules of the game.
The new regulation begins on the 5th of October. Critics argue that the regulation will actually result in double taxation for internet users because people already pay taxes on data usage. The regulation comes into force ahead of next year's presidential poll.
Now that we're in a political season, we can also see people who are flocking to us wanting authorization because they want to cash in on the virtual campaigns so that they can be able to push content for politicians, which is fantastic. And we're saying this can actually be done successfully, but well regulated.
The changes are part of sweeping internet regulations introduced by the government in 2018, including a social media tax. Online experts are concerned that the new law could be used to stifle freedoms of expression.
I don't think so that they are looking for money, no. That's out. What I think, they are looking for those few social media influencers who trade in falsehoods.
Uganda has one of the lowest internet penetration at 14%. And for now, social media bloggers like Kagumire will keep pushing for increased usage of the internet space. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
To North Africa now, where sales of personal computers across Egypt surged 15% during the first half of 2020. They were boosted by lockdown measures that have seen the majority of employees forced to work from home. Egypt imposed a nationwide curfew in late March, shutting down schools and airports to brace for the coronavirus outbreak. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Kim with more.
School teacher Dalia Khairi, and who is also a mother of 2 young sons, has had to contend with working from home since April. following the lockdown measures imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19.
mainly بدأ معانا من أول كورونا فعلا الأونلاين.
I started working from home after the pandemic hit the country and my son had to study from home. There are positive aspects to this since you don't waste time in traffic jams, transportation, and going up and down and so on. The negative is that you miss socialization and are glued in front of the device all day.
Dalia had one PC for the family, but after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, she had to buy 2 more computers for her boys to do their homework on time. She says many families, including the low-income ones, had to do the same, and this has had a positive impact on PC sales in the North African nation. According to data released by the Federation of Egyptian Chambers of Commerce, PC sales increased by between 10 to 15% during the first half of the year.
It's true, demand for tablets and PCs has increased, though tablets has seen more sales. That's because the students are conducting their studies online and the elderly are working from home.
Working from home is comfortable and minimizes the spread of the virus. But would Dalia continue with this arrangement after the pandemic has been contained?
We will definitely go out. I love having a social life and meeting people, as well as going back to work. It shapes the personality of human beings, including children.
On the streets of the capital, Cairo, crowds have noticeably increased, reflecting Dalia's opinion, despite the existence of the dangers still posed by the virus. And that could also have an impact on PC sales during the last 4 months of the year. But for now, 2020 is turning out to be a good year for computer sales in the country. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Over in Europe, many German restaurants and hotels are taking their insurance companies to court. They're demanding that they pay for the damages incurred from the state-ordered coronavirus lockdown. CGTN's Natalie Carney reports from Munich.
Christian Rottenhamel owns one of the biggest beer gardens in the city. He is suing his insurance company for $1.6 million in compensation.
We have taken out business closure insurance that amounts to a very large sum, but received an offer from the insurance company that we rejected, as it was only 15% of the actual amount. And that is too little for us, and that is why we are suing in court.
A total of 72 complaints against insurance companies have been received by the Regional Court of Munich, and that number continues to rise. Following the 2-month state-regulated lockdown earlier this year, the Bavarian government immediately offered financial incentives to help recoup losses, which it says makes up 70% of the damages incurred by businesses. The remaining 30%, the state argues, is in the hands of the insurance companies.
Normally, we have 700 events per year. All of them were certainly canceled.
Fellow beer garden owner Karl-Heinz Zacher is also taking a large international insurer to court. He says they owe him $500,000 after saying his lockdown-related claim was invalid.
The insurance company very quickly rejected our claim, stating that this general ruling, or legislative decree, that has been issued by the Free State of Bavaria is not valid, because our company is not so-called intrinsically affected, because we did not have a COVID case ourselves.
The terminology of the insurance contract is where much of the problems lie. Not all insurance policy conditions coincide with the health and safety rules introduced by the Bavarian authorities in the wake of COVID-19. At the same time, not all establishments shut down completely. A local kindergarten, which was state-ordered to remain open for children of frontline workers, lost their case for compensation.
Only about 10% of the whole facility was open during that time, but the court was of the opinion that the insurance didn't have to pay for the closing of the facility. We will appeal the decision because we do not think that it's just.
Zacher has had his day in court and hopes to receive a decision later this month, but says he will continue to fight it to the highest court if he has to.
I'm still sure that this issue will go further. I believe it will not be done with the first hearing. There will be appeals. I think that if politicians do not intervene, lawsuits will last for many years to come.
This battle to claim compensation is growing around the world. Earlier this week, British judges ruled that insurers were wrong to reject claims, a move that is estimated to affect 370,000 businesses and billions in insurance claims.
While many verdicts are still pending, insurance companies continue to offer business closure insurance. However, these renewed contracts now include pandemic exclusion clauses in case state officials are again put in a position whereby most companies must be shut down due to a pandemic. Natalie Carney for CGTN in Munich.
Well, let's now take a short break. When we return, we'll look at how the growing popularity of Ghana's Kente cloth has impacted the lives of its designers.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A local Ghanaian cloth, Kente, has widely been portrayed the country's pride and heritage for centuries. In the U.S., it has long been worn by the African-American community during important ceremonies such as graduations. In June, some U.S. lawmakers wore Kente as they looked to pass a bill on police reform following the death of George Floyd, an African-American who died in police custody. This led to an increased interest in the cloth. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai tells us more about the Kente significance and its history.
Footwork and hand coordination, both vital ingredients in the making of the indigenous Ghanaian cloth, Kente. Samuel Bampo has been weaving since he was a child. Now at the age 72, he still makes a living by producing these colorful cloths.
One cannot learn how to weave the Kente within 6 months. It takes many years to perfect this craft. There are lots of designs and you need to keep them all in memory. We don't have the designs on paper to serve as a reference.
The Kente cloth is part of the heritage of the Ashanti people in Ghana and was initially worn only by royalty. Ordinary Ghanaians now wear it during special occasions like weddings. Each block, pattern and color has a distinct name and meaning.
We made this design in celebration of the love between Kwame Nkrumah and his wife Fatia. We named it Fatia Befits Nkrumah.
These strips of Kente are joined together to make the full cloth.
Legend has it that a spider spinning a complex web inspired the earliest Kente techniques and designs, and you can see why. A lot of precision and mind work is required to weave the cloth. One like this can take up to 2 days to make.
Weavers say they take 2 months or more to make 6 yards of the Kente cloth. A full cloth can be sold for as much as $350, depending on its designs and colors.
We import all the threads we use for weaving the Kente cloth. This makes it very expensive to produce. It could be less expensive if we're able to produce the threads locally.
The traditional weaving of Kente cloth has existed since the 11th century in Ghana. It has defied any form of technological innovation. Samuel says, despite the advanced technology in cloth making, the handmade Kente cloth should continue to be preserved to protect the Ghanaian heritage. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The sport news is coming up after the break. Here's what you can expect. Nigeria's Tokyo 2020 Paralympics medal hopefuls run into new hurdles.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
It's time now for your sport news. Para-athletes in Nigeria are hard at work in preparation for the Tokyo Paralympics to be held next year. However, they're training under some very challenging conditions. CGTN's Deji Badmus reports.
This was late last year when the country's para-athletes were preparing for the final stages of their qualifiers for the Tokyo 2020 Paralympics. But a couple of months later, the coronavirus pandemic broke out, leading to the cancellation of all sporting activities across the world, including the Paralympic Games. In Nigeria, even the stadium where the athletes train has remained short ever since.
Due to the fact that I've even prepared myself for the Paralympics, so I feel so sad for the Paralympic to be postponed.
Ojeleye is one of Nigeria's top para-athletes. He was among those getting ready for the final Tokyo 2020 qualifiers before the pandemic broke out. He's been keeping fit at home under the sporting lockdown, with his Paralympics dream still alive.
I'm trying all my best to make the target, to make the standard for the Paralympic next year. So we're preparing ourselves, we're trying our best to make sure that I make the time for the Paralympic.
Like Ojeleye, the captain of the national wheelchair racing team, Akonija Lili, cannot wait to resume full training.
Though we are not really started training proper because of the situation of the things, but individually and with the coach, we still do some training.
Being a para-athlete in Nigeria is tough. Funding for para-sports is quite abysmal, and athletes often train under difficult conditions to make it to national and international competitions.
For example, now, you can't compare $8,000 wheelchair with $2,000 wheelchair. So we don't have the facilities. They have all the facilities to meet up the standard and all that. Like we are an African, we have power, we have everything. But the major problem is the facility and equipment.
We don't have all these important things we need for special training, like special sport facilities for training. Because the only way we can train wheelchair race, either on track or on road. But in Nigeria, there's no better road, let me use that way, and there's no safe place to tell an athlete to be on a wheelchair and start running all over the street.
Even in the face of the daunting challenges, the athletes are forging ahead. For Ojeleye, nothing will stand in his way of accomplishing his lifelong dream.
My dream is, number one, to be at the Paralympic, number one. And number two, to my target, my number one target is to have a medal. And I'm sure by the grace of God and by hard working, it's going to come true.
The wheelchair racer and basketball player is determined to bring honor and pride to his country and himself against all odds. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
We turn to action now from the UEFA Europa League, where Italian giant AC Milan sunk Irish side Shamrock Rovers 2-0 to advance